I used to believe that honor and trust were enough to hold a person, but then she proved otherwise. All the support, the commitments, the years I spent building her rearguard, all I got in return was a cold text message. I'm sorry, I've met someone else. Betrayal doesn't need a dagger or a bullet. A few words can cut deeper than any blade. The question becomes, how does a soldier like me handle it when trust is exploited and discarded? I didn't choose grief, nor did I choose blind revenge. I cut ties, withdrew, and observed from a distance. The consequences found her faster than any plan I could have devised. And the only thing I kept was the lesson. Misplaced trust is the most dangerous vulnerability. I am Major Cole Sullivan, U.S. Army. My life is built on discipline and honor. In my world, everything has an order: the mission, the objective, and the strategy to achieve it. After 6 months in a place where the only order was a command, I returned to Charleston. I needed a quiet place for my mind to rest, so I found an art gallery. I didn't go to see the art. I went because it wasn't loud. And then I saw her, Genevieve Jen Vance. She stood before a painting, quietly taking notes in a small notebook. Her focus so intense, she seemed unaware of the world around her. There was something about that seriousness that drew me in a dedication to a passion I rarely encountered. It was a world away from my own. I watched for a moment, then decided to approach. "What's special about this one?" I asked, my voice low enough not to startle her. Jen looked up, a little surprised, but then her eyes lit up. When she began to explain, her voice wasn't dreamy. It was articulate, logical. She turned the chaos of colors into an ordered narrative, pointing out every intention of the artist. I respected that. One question led to a conversation, and that conversation led to more. We started talking regularly. I spoke of my life in measured terms. She, in contrast, spoke of her dream with unbridled passion. A master's program in art conservation in New York, a clear objective. "So, what's the next step in the plan?" I asked. That's when the smile faded from her lips. She spoke of the obstacle. There's always an obstacle. Hers was a matter of logistics. Money. The tuition and cost of living were a wall she couldn't breach on her own. I listened, and my mind automatically began to sort the data. It was no different from analyzing a situation in the field. The objective was clear: Jen's degree. The obstacle was a simple but solid wall: funds, and the resources to overcome it. My own savings, accumulated over years of service in places where there was nothing to buy. After a few weeks, the full picture was clear. I believed she was a worthy investment. I knew what I had to do. One evening, as we were walking, I stopped and addressed the issue directly, my voice as even as if I were giving a mission briefing. "I've run the numbers," I began. "The costs for 2 years in New York. It's within my means." Jen looked at me, confused. "Cole, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a plan," I replied. "The objective is your degree. I'll handle the logistics. You just need to focus on the primary target." She froze, her eyes wide. I said nothing more. I just stood there, letting my offer settle. It wasn't a question, it was a calculated solution. In my mind, this was a commitment of honor, a mission now underway. I had trusted her character, her integrity. It was a critical failure of intelligence. And it was my last mistake where she was concerned. Jen agreed. A week later, I used my leave to fly with her to New York. This wasn't a vacation. It had a clear objective. I wasn't looking for an apartment. I was looking for a location that met the necessary criteria. It had to be safe, close to a subway for easy transit, and quiet enough for her to focus on her studies. We found a studio in Brooklyn that met all specifications. I handled the lease and the security deposit. Everything was settled efficiently. Then, I left. My duties required my presence elsewhere. The financial support was established as an automated system. A fixed amount was transferred to her account on the 1st of every month. Enough for tuition, rent, and living expenses. I never checked her statements. Once a plan is approved, you trust its execution. Micromanagement is unnecessary and demonstrates a lack of faith. Our relationship transitioned to video calls and email updates. I'm no art connoisseur, but I'm a good soldier, and a good soldier studies his terrain. She sent me her essays. I read them, not to understand the Renaissance, but to understand how she thought, the challenges she faced. "You actually read this stuff?" Jen once asked, half surprised, half amused. Of course. If you consider it your mission, I consider it mine, I replied. I could hear the change with every call. Her voice no longer held the hesitation of the girl from Charleston. It had the confidence of a professional mastering her field. She told me about her professors, about ambitious projects, and her grades were always outstanding. Our relationship was built not on romantic promises, but on mutual trust and a shared goal. I secured the rear guard. She focused on the advance. And she advanced quickly. Jen thrived in the new academic environment. Her professors recognized her effort and talent. Then came a text that made me sit still for a few seconds before the screen. I got the internship at the museum. Oh, I could hear the pride in her words. I felt it too. That internship wasn't a stroke of luck. It was proof that our plan was on the right track. I typed back just 3 words. I knew you would. In that moment, I was certain I had made the right bet. The entire operation was proceeding exactly as planned. I had complete faith in the system, faith in the operator. I believed my rearguard was secure. In the military, that's an assumption that can cost you everything. I was on my final tour before my commission ended. 6 months in a place where time was measured in patrols and contact with the outside world was limited to sporadic calls. On the other side of the globe, my plan was still in motion. Or so I thought. The calls became less frequent. At first, I attributed it to her demanding internship schedule. A logical explanation. High performance requires focus. But then, the content of our conversations shifted. In the art world, everything revolves around glamour and connections. I knew that, but I never thought it would become a direct threat. Jen, however, was drawn in. She told me about lavish parties, about influential figures in the industry, and then the name Preston Ashford III began to surface, an art dealer who, according to her, was very well connected. He knows so many important people, she said, a good professional contact. I accepted the intel. In any field, a network is a strategic asset, but the name Preston started coming up more and more. Discussions about academic projects were replaced by stories of galas and gallery openings he had taken her to. The situation reports were no longer detailed. They became vague. I didn't need to meet him to picture him. A young, polished man who held connections I didn't have. He represented the allure of the easy path, the shortcuts. What I had built with discipline and consistency, he offered with a few promises. I noticed the change in Jen's voice over the screen. She mentioned him more. It wasn't just about her studies and projects anymore, but about opportunities, about new doors. I didn't intervene. A soldier knows. Some battles cannot be prevented, only observed to determine when they will conclude. I felt a sense of unease, a small warning signal that combat experience had taught me never to ignore. But I dismissed it. I had invested too much in this plan to accept the possibility of it going off course. I held on to logic. She was building her career. This was part of the process. The 6 months ended. I sat on a military transport flight home, tired but satisfied. The overseas mission was complete. Mission Genevieve was also nearing a successful conclusion. I had already planned to fly straight to New York. When the plane landed and I turned on my phone, a message was waiting. I scrolled through the notifications, then stopped. It was from General. It was very brief. I'm sorry. I've met someone else. Don't contact me again. The phone in my hand suddenly felt heavy. The noise of the soldiers around me seemed to fade away. I read the message again, and then a third time, not to find a different meaning, but to confirm the data. I didn't feel anger, not pain, just a cold stillness that settled over me, as if a switch in my head had been flipped to a different setting. My brain began to process the new information. The situation has changed. The mission has failed. The relationship is terminated. All emotion is secondary. Action is the priority. I opened the reply, my thumb moving with precision. Roger that. Then I blocked her number. The taxi left the airbase. I wasn't going home. In my mind, a checklist of necessary actions had already formed, clear and prioritized. I took out my phone. The first call was to the bank. I need to cancel a recurring monthly transfer, I said when I was connected. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Yes, sir. Let me pull that up. I provided the necessary details. Account numbers, recipient's name, the amount. No explanation. This was a transaction, not a confession. It's confirmed, sir. The transfer has been canceled. No further payments will be made next month. Thank you, I said, and hung up. Objective 1. Complete. The primary supply line was cut. Next, the apartment lease. I opened my email, found the contract I had saved nearly 2 years ago. I reviewed the early termination clause, forfeiture of the security deposit and a possible penalty fee, an acceptable loss to sever all legal ties. I composed a new email to the property management company in Brooklyn. It was brief, professional, and to the point. I cited the contract clause, stated that I would no longer be responsible as the guarantor after the current month, and requested instructions for the necessary procedures. Sent. Objective 2. Complete. Legal liability contained. Finally, I did a full system sweep. Her emails were routed to a filter that deleted them automatically. Any shared social media accounts were deactivated. I deleted all photos, not out of heartbreak, but because they were now irrelevant data, a system purge. By the time the taxi pulled up to a temporary hotel, it was all done. The entire process had taken less than 30 minutes. There was no chaos, no rage, just a sequence of operational necessities. When it was finished, I closed my laptop and leaned back. Outside the window, clouds drifted by in cold gray patches. I knew with certainty, from this moment on, the name Jen was no longer in my orbit. The silence lasted exactly 1 week. I knew it wouldn't last forever. In any conflict, after one side withdraws, the other probes. I wasn't surprised that her first reaction was disorientation. Someone accustomed to living on logistical support doesn't adapt easily when the supply line is cut overnight. But I didn't expect her to let Preston convince her to step onto a battlefield where I was more at home than anyone. Legal warfare. It wasn't a text. It was an email, formal, from a law firm in New York. The subject line was clear. Cessation of financial support for Miss Genevieve Vance. I read the email twice, not because I was shocked, but to analyze the enemy's tactics. The language was crafted to sound professional while being threatening. It spoke of reasonable expectation, of how I had created a situation of financial dependency, and how the sudden termination of support had caused severe economic and emotional distress to their client. The final section was the demand. Continue paying her rent and provide a living stipend for 1 year, plus a compensation payment of $20,000. Otherwise, they would pursue all necessary legal action. Standard intimidation tactics. They were betting I'd be afraid of the trouble or feel guilty. They had misjudged their target. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the email to the base's JAG office with a single line, requesting counsel. In the afternoon, I got a call from a captain in the legal department. "Major," he said, his voice crisp, "I've reviewed the email. This is a bluff. They have no legal grounds. Your support was voluntary, not contractual. You have no further obligation." "My assessment as well," I replied. "We'll draft a response," the captain continued. "It will state your position, affirm that all obligations have been met, and that any further legal action will be considered frivolous and met with a countersuit. We'll handle it." "Good. Thank you, Captain." The response was sent by the end of the day. Its language was cold, legal, and airtight. It was a wall of steel. That was the end of her first attempt. A wall of steel. But the desperate always find another way. Preston didn't want to pay for a dream out of his own pocket. He needed Jen to play the victim to burnish his own reputation, and Jen, reeling, went along with it. This time, it wasn't legal documents. It was public opinion. The next tactic wasn't aimed at me, but at everyone around me. It was a post on an art blog Jen frequented. I didn't find it myself. An old friend sent it to me with a message. "You should see this." I saw it. The title of the post was "The Hero's Shadow." It didn't mention me by name, but the details were meticulously laid out. An army officer who promised to support my dream, who used financial support as a tool of control. The post told the story of a naive young woman helped by a powerful man, only to be cruelly abandoned when she dared to find her own happiness. It was a masterfully crafted piece, written in an emotional language designed to evoke sympathy. It cast her as the victim and me as a silent abuser. I finished reading, closed my laptop, and felt nothing. No anger, no desire to set the record straight. This was information warfare, and the best way to counter it is not to engage. Any response from me would only add fuel to the fire, validating her narrative. My silence was the most effective weapon. The blog post spread faster than she thought. The academic art world isn't large. Within a few days, most people in her network had heard of it. But the reaction wasn't what she expected. No one saw her as a victim. They saw someone willing to turn a private matter into a public weapon, uncontrolled and unprofessional. In a community that runs on reputation and relationships, that was the end. A week later, I heard from a friend in the industry. Her faculty advisor had called her into his office. He didn't yell, but his words were apparently clearer and heavier than any military report I'd ever received. Deep disappointment, and a warning that no patron or museum wanted to be associated with a student who could create public drama. The result was immediate. Jen's prestigious internship at the museum was postponed indefinitely, a polite way of saying it was canceled. No official reason was given. But in a world where wealthy patrons and board members avoid public controversy at all costs, a blog post like that was a form of professional suicide. It didn't bring her the sympathy she expected. It brought her a reputation as someone unprofessional, someone willing to air private grievances to attack another person. I didn't have to intervene. Everything collapsed on its own. And with her academic halo gone, her relationship with Preston Ashford ended as well. He was, apparently, attracted to a rising star, not a student in trouble and at risk of failure. To him, Jen had been a valuable asset, a brilliant student with a bright future, easy to leverage to raise his own status. But when she became a reputational liability, no longer a promising asset but a burden, he quickly withdrew. Her plan had backfired spectacularly. She had tried to create a narrative to gain an advantage, but in the end, that narrative destroyed her. She had misjudged her environment, misjudged the people around her, and most critically, she had misjudged my silence. I just watched from a distance. No joy, no regret. It was simply collateral damage, a chain of dominoes she had tipped over herself. In the end, she lost everything. My support was gone, the internship was gone, her scholarship prospects were gone. Preston vanished, leaving behind empty promises. Her finances dried up. With no other options, Jen was forced to drop out of the program and return to South Carolina. The dream she had once described to me with shining eyes was now just shattered pieces, broken by her own choices. A few months later, I received a call from an unknown number. I don't usually answer, but something compelled me to. It was General. Her voice had none of the confidence of the New York student. There was no anger, no defiance, just fatigue. "I'm leaving the city," she said without a greeting. "I'm moving back to Charleston." I was silent. There was nothing to say. I just wanted. "I don't know," she faltered. "Everything. It all fell apart." "I know," I replied. A long pause stretched between us. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. She was probably waiting for something. Gloating? Comfort? Forgiveness? I offered her none of it. "Good luck, Jen," I said, my voice even. Then I hung up. That was the last time we ever spoke. I never looked into what became of her after that. The mission was over. The file closed. What happened next was no longer my concern. Occasionally, I think about the whole affair, not with bitterness, but with the cold clarity of a soldier reviewing a past operation. I analyzed my mistake. I had learned a lesson that no battlefield could teach, that kindness and trust also need an objective, and you must choose the right person to invest them in. I don't regret wanting to help. I only regret my assessment. In military terms, it was a failure of intelligence, and that failure has been corrected by experience. The day I put my uniform back on, standing tall before the mirror, I saw it more clearly than ever. The scratch on the shield of my honor had scarred over. It left a mark, but it also made the shield stronger. I had survived a personal battle, and now I was ready for the real ones ahead. My life went on. I finished my commission and received new assignments. Order was restored. I am still Major Cole Sullivan, U.S. Army. I still live by discipline and honor, but now I am wiser. And in my world, wisdom is also a weapon.